This is about Kieran Trippier, of course, the right back from Newcastle. Bayern Munich have made an offer that has been rejected by Newcastle, right, Stefan?
Yep.
They have now threatened to stop negotiations entirely. I think, there's a sigh here because I think this is this latest addition from the Premier League that Bayern are making. They have signed Eric Dyer, of course, previously from Tottenham. I don't know how much they will actually play him. I put him into the same kind of signing as Daley Blind last year. I just don't think there is much creativity here when it comes to finding solutions for Bayern Munich in what is a key position for them, because they're quite thin at right back, Stefan.
Yeah, I mean, you could make certainly a strong case that, Trippier would be a good signing because he'd be an immediate signing. He'd be a player who can immediately step into the team. He's very experienced, having played in the Premier League and La Liga, England international as well. And up until maybe a month or two ago, he was also a very in-form good player. I mean, I think he still is a good player. It's just obviously things at Newcastle have kind of gone a bit sideways recently. And, I could perfectly see him kind of step into that Bayern team and being their kind of first choice right back for the rest of the season, if and when Bayern do choose to sign him. But there's no doubt it's an odd move, simply because he's 33 years old, and he's not what I would say the kind of typical profile player that Bayern tend to go for. I think you could probably make a case that they're obviously kind of looking at him in the same light as why they looked at Eric Dyer, in the sense that, Eric Dyer had 6 months left of his contract, so he was a very cheap option for them. And similarly, Trippier plays for a club who have to sell players this month to kind of stay in line with FFP rules. There's a lot of talk about Newcastle selling a number of players. Almiron's been linked with moves. Bruno Guimaraes been linked with moves. A few other players, but of course Trippier is another one as well. So Bayern maybe thought, hey, here's a guy who could step into our team relatively cheap and do a job for us. But I do understand why Bayern fans and maybe be a little underwhelmed by it. I do have a theory here, which might be one of those kind of galaxy brain things, but I think if you kind of look at some of the players that Bayern have signed so far this season, and particularly this window, obviously Eric Dyer, and if they do go and sign Kevin Trippier, they're two players who are obviously quite old or older, signed on very short-term contracts. I mean, even if they do sign Trippier, I can't imagine he'll be offered more than maybe an 18-month contract. And I just kind of wonder if this is Bayern looking for stopgaps before Christoph Freund steps in next year and starts making some, proper long-term signings. Obviously, we know that the club are in the middle of this kind of transition from, a kind of transfer committee that Thomas Tuchel obviously played a large part in last year. That's why we saw Bayern gets linked with a number of kind of Premier League players. Kyle Walker, perhaps the most high profile, aside from Harry Kane himself. And we know that obviously Max Eberl's moving in, Nepa's moved on, and Christoph Freund's came in, and he's kind of seen as this kind of transfer guru who will help Bayern put together a team, help them build a team that can obviously function for 10-year spans rather than just season to season to season. I just kind of think that Bayern, as a business or as an operation, are just kind of waiting for Freund to get started next year. And signings like Dyer and Trippier strike me as short-term fixes and players who are obviously going to join the club and not expecting to be there for the next 4 or 5 years. And that allows Bayern to A, save money, and B, then kind of approach the summer transfer window with a clean slate, if you will.
I can actually add to this, and I think your theory is a good one, because Bayern Munich will host the UEFA Champions League final in 2025, right? And this does kind of feel like a transition year. I even get the sense if they lose the Bundesliga title this season, I don't even think they would think that is the end of the world, because it would be a larger picture kind of thinking here, right? I think obviously Bayern Munich are always going to try to reach the later stages of the Champions League, win it, and I think they're in it. I don't think they're good enough to beat the likes of Manchester City, but maybe someone else will take care of them for you. You never know, right? Like you can reach a final, have an opportune opponent, and still win it. But I think the thinking here is a different one. They're building a team for 2025, and that's why your theory makes sense, because you bring in Eric Dyer, he will get you to the end of the season, right? You bring in Kieran Trippier, he will bring you to the end of the season. Does he get a job? Maybe he will actually be a longer term piece. That's great if it works out. If not, bye. I actually think what you're saying there makes a lot of sense, because it does kind of feel like a transition. And yes, there's some rumors about Thomas Tuchel now being questioned by the Bayern leadership and all that kind of stuff. I think I don't get the same sense of panic at the club than I did last year with Julian Nagelsmann, even if they do trip up and not win the title. You know what I mean? Like, it just kind of feels a little different, and I feel like almost there's an acceptance of the squad is aging out. We have to bring in pieces to kind of rebuild a team that is not only a Bundesliga title challenger, but a Champions League challenger every single year. And that might mean we have to make some really strategic decisions in the short term.
Yeah, absolutely. And it would make a lot of sense as to why maybe Thomas Tuchel's getting more time and there's shown a lot more patience perhaps than previous head coaches may have got in his position. We talked about it on the main show in terms of how his overall record of the club's perfectly fine, at least in the league anyway. Obviously, how he'll do in the Champions League remains to be seen. But, if he is going to the boards in the summer or in this window saying, we need to make big signings here, and they're responding saying, well, we can't because in 12 months' time or in 6 months' time, Christoph is going to come in with his whole new strategy, then Tuchel could obviously turn around and say, right, well, just make sure you guys remember that when, I'm dropping points to Werder Bremen or getting kicked out of the Champions League in the semi-final. We need that context to be in place for how this team's expected to play, because, you look at that squad and there's obviously a huge number of talented players in it, but there's a lot of players there who maybe beginning to look a little long in the tooth in terms of how long they've been at Bayern, maybe looking a little jaded, looking a little bored, becoming part of the furniture, and it does feel like there has to be a kind of a bigger shake-up of that squad, and maybe that's something that we can expect to see in the summer. And until then, as we said, an Eric Dyer here, a Kieran Trippier there, kind of covers over the cracks and keeps the ship afloat, if you will, until the end of the season.
Yeah, it is fascinating. I think this next summer will be really interesting for Bayern Munich, because I think that Harry Kane was a key piece, but I think he was a piece, and they mentioned this actually in the press conference when they announced Harry Kane, that it was all for 2025 was the big goal, reaching the Champions League final in 2025, and righting the wrong of 2012 and Bayern Munich lost to Chelsea in the final. I think that is actually something that's really important for the club, and I think that's also really important context here to understand the strategic decisions that they are making. Speaking of strategic decisions and clubs going for it, the team that's currently first in the Bundesliga table, they are set to sign Borja Iglesias